It is officially 8:30. My name's Ron, I'm an alcoholic. Hey, welcome to the 2 day before Christmas meeting, okay? We've got a pretty festive lineup here. Ant's going to come up here and chair this. I don't know what else I got to tell you guys. Please, no smoking on church property, vitally important. The church wants us to be respectful of their property. I don't know why they want that. $10 million facility, we get to use it, and just be mindful of that. We got a ton of coffee, a ton of food, help us eat that there. What else? Oh yeah, we have a Facebook page to stay connected, to see not only what's going on in this group, but all up and down the East Coast. Stay connected. There's always something going on every single day. In fact, if you have something to post, please post it there. We have flyers in the back. Our sister group is a big book study, meets on Thursday. Come over there. We love that big book. People get better despite themselves when they're in and around that book, and it's always a lot of fun. 7:30 on a Thursday. Anyway, Ant's going to come up here and enjoy the night.
All right, welcome everyone to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name's Anthony, and I'm an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. right here. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, please simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first names?
My name's Ronnie, I'm an alcoholic.
Welcome, Ronnie. Welcome.
Mitch, I'm an alcoholic.
Welcome, Mitch. Welcome. Anyone else? All right. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Thanks for your service. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? All right. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any other home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put the donations in the jar on the back of the table marked big book and CD donations, and it's back there somewhere. If you would like a CD of any speaker past or present, see me or Ron before or after this meeting. They are available free of charge. And I've asked Bill to come up and read the AA preamble.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill. I'm an alcoholic. AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, and does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I've asked Aaron to come up and read the AA 12 steps.
Hey guys, my name is Aaron and I am an alcoholic. The AA 12 steps of recovery. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 9, may direct them as to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Thanks.
All right, the 7th tradition, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, we'd like to pass the basket. We do not have any dues or fees, but we do have expenses. Your donations cover coffee, cream, donuts, hot sausage, hot dogs, rent, big book, CDs, events and workshops, and Brett's hand sliders. There is absolutely no smoking on the church. Absolutely. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now I'm going to introduce our speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, Kim P. from the South Philly Group.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Woo, just when I needed a little shot to the ego before I share God's message now. Oh, God help me. Whew, I'm nervous. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Ron. My name's Kimberly Ann Package. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. Sober through God's grace. God's grace only. God's grace only. Well, I mean, I was helped by good sponsorship and a spiritual program of action called Alcoholics Anonymous, but I know who got me sober and I know who keeps me sober. And I make no bones about that. I make no apologies about it either. I want to welcome anybody who did share that they were new or from out of town or visiting, and or this is their first meeting or first time here. It's a good group. It's a solid group. They do the best to carry experience, strength, and hope so that others might be saved. I think that's the primary purpose here, right? Stay sober, help another alcoholic to achieve sobriety, twofold, and I'll do my best to do that. How it works is pretty specific. It says that I should share what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And my sponsor and I were talking on the way up in the car, and it's vastly different in a lot of respects, and in some respects it's still the same. You know, it's amazing to me. Such a paradoxical, beautiful spiritual program, and I can't tell you how grateful I am to be here. What a night to come and be asked to share your experience, strength, and hope, you know, on a beautiful holiday weekend, and you know, just celebrate in the only way that is the right way for me to celebrate, you know, carrying a message, or you know, being in service, or thanking God out loud. Man, I'll tell you what I was like, and then maybe you'll understand why I'm so grateful. I'm probably going to jump out of my skin while I'm talking. Like this. Yeah, exactly. Yeehaw, right? Phew. So I'm born and raised in South Philadelphia. I come from a long line of drinkers. You know, my father drank, his brother drank, his brother drank, their father drank, be my grandfather, my grandmother drank on that side, and you know, I don't pronounce anybody an alcoholic. My father is alcoholic. He says it about himself. He's sober 2 years longer than me in the spiritual program of action. So when I say he's alcoholic, I say that because he has given me permission to do so. He identifies himself. My mother's side of the family, I'll say they certainly looked like they might have alcoholism. I don't know. But it's rampant. It's rampant in my family. And I was born and raised around booze. My father is a two-streeter and a mummer. So, you know, the mummers parade comes, and all year long they drink. They drink while they're celebrating. They drink while they're practicing. They drink while they're rehearsing. They drink during, you know, it's just during fundraisers. You know, it's, I want to say baptisms, first birthdays, communion, penance, confirmation, graduation. Like there's never not a good reason to get loaded. And so like I came up around booze a really long time, and was always in our house. My mom and dad were the kids on the block having kids. So their house was the party house. My father were 18 when they had my sister Dawn. They were a little older than 19 when they had me. There was a baby that didn't come to full term. And then after my mom was able, there was another one. So we were almost like Irish twins all the way down, you know what I mean? But there's 3 of us. There's now 6 of us. But at the time, there was 3 of us. And, we were always with the babysitter. If my parents weren't drinking in the house, with their friends in the house, they were out drinking, and we were in with the babysitters who were drinking. And so we were always around booze. And guess what? I loved it. There were a lot of times I wasn't complaining. I got to stay up late. My father would be playing music, and all his bandmates would be at the house, and, who had the banjo and who had the drum. My father played the drums and the saxophone, and, they just had live music all the time, and I would sit on my Uncle Joey's lap, and he would bounce me on his knee, and I would, and my father would be getting half in the bag, and he would say, it's time to go to bed, Kim. And my Uncle Joey would go, leave her alone. She's not bothering nobody. Go get Uncle Joey a beer. And I would go over to the refrigerator and I go, can I have a sip? And he'd say, just a foam, just a little. And I would sip the beer. He would sell the nips then, and I would sit on his lap, and I was mesmerized by it all. I loved it. From that young, I just loved it, the whole atmosphere. And then I would go to bed, and they would do it every weekend. Every weekend. They were either in or out or partying or whatever, and I don't know what happened, man. Things started to just, turn. Now, I think they were always like that because my father was always a drinker. Hung with a lot of guys on the corner in South Philly, shorts and courts, you know what I mean? Foot up against the wall, stickball, and, just drinking all the time. And he was a dock worker. He worked down along shore, so he would go down, punch his card, and go to the bar and drink, and then go back for lunch and punch his card and go to the bar and drink. And sometimes somebody would work his number, and sometimes he would work somebody else's number. I think something started to change for me in that environment where, I love the first step in the 12 and 12. It says alcohol is a rapacious creditor. It's a greedy creditor. And it bleeds all will to resist its demands, but it turns on you and it cuts you all but the ribbons, right? And so what started to happen was my mother would call around the bar looking for my dad. And she'd say, is Chrissy there? And he would get on the phone. And we knew, based on what that phone call was like, what was our next steps to be, you know what I mean? And if he got on the phone and he said, yeah, babe, and she said, listen, I got dinner on the table. What are we having? Chicken cutlet. I'll be right around. Blah blah blah. All would be good. But if he picked up that phone and he said, what are you looking for me for? We knew we had about 5 minutes to get ourselves together and run around the corner to my grandmother's because he was going to come home and beat my mother like she was a total stranger into the street. And it was crazy. I was scared to death of my father. When that stuff started to really surface and really happen, I was terrified. I can't tell you exactly what day, I can't tell you exactly what time, but I know at some point I started to be gripped, and I mean gripped with terror. My father would come in the house and I would be seized with just unimaginable fear. Oftentimes I hid upstairs, I hid in the closets, I hid under the bed. If it was late and he came in, sometimes it would be okay. And he would be saying, come on down, we're going to eat. And he'd have cheesesteaks from Pat's or Gino's, and we would go down, and you didn't tell him no, but we would go down and we could be okay. We could eat, and he'd be like, I love you girls, Daddy loves you, and blah, blah, blah. And it would be real sentimental and nostalgic, and I would feel like, whoosh, and I had to keep him that way because he could turn on a dime. Thanks, Dad. We love you too, and, blah, blah, blah. But if he came in and you heard a ruckus and you heard some furniture smashing, I just trained myself to stay in the bed. So much so that I became a bedwetter, and I wet the bed until I was about 12 or 13 years old. I knew not to move. I couldn't get involved. I saw a few times what happened when one of us got involved. And it was violent. And so I came up in that kind of environment. The cops were always at our house. They would kick the door in, drag my father out, arrest him. If he wasn't fighting with my mother, he was fist fighting with somebody else. He got hurt down Longshore, and he couldn't do his job anymore. they work with like 80,000-pound containers, and his partner on the dock made a mistake, lost his footing, and the container ripped my father and ripped his back all the way up, and he was probably about 27 years old and he couldn't work anymore, 27, 28. And so being a union longshoreman and the opportunities that they had for suing the shipyard back then, they had to basically pay him out from the age of retirement in his settlement, from 27 to whatever that would have been, 55, 65 at the time. It was a lot of money for the 70s, a lot of money for the 70s. And my mother was in heaven. My mother thought that we were going to get a brand new life. We were going to move out of the city. We were going to move away, and we were going to have a happily ever after. Now, we probably weren't going to go any further than like Pennsauken or Belmar or Roxborough, but which is still technically in the city, but it's far enough away that we don't consider it South Philly, right? So we were just like really like in a little, radius. But to my mom, it meant a brand new start. It meant a happily ever after. It meant a husband. It meant, being parents to their kids. And I remember her taking us around, right? Taking us around and looking at these houses. And I was just as excited for this brand new start. I mean, I was like, thank you, God, for answering my prayers. Because by the way, before I even hit Catholic school at 5 and 6 and 7, I talked to God. I knew him. I don't know how I know him. Maybe because he knew me first. But I did. And I used to say, God, I know you don't want me to think like this. Why am I thinking like this? I know you don't want me to feel like this. Please help me to stop feeling like this. Can't you help me? Won't you change me? Can't you? Like I just was like, I'm telling you, like I can feel it. It's visceral, the way I used to talk to him and beg him to help me, help us, change me, just bless me, just keep me, just always talking to him. And I remember running through these houses and thinking, this one's my room, this one's my room. Like I was so excited, and my sisters would be there and we would look and go. And I remember like it was yesterday when my mother lost all will to live, I think. We were at my grandmother's house, my father's mother, and we were sitting at the table, and my mom was on one side and my grandmother was on the other, and we were just kind of like all right around, and my grandmother said, Debbie, you can't move to Jersey. And my mother said, what do you mean we can't move to Jersey? Why not? She said, well, how's Chrissy going to get home when he's drinking? Like there was never a don't drink, maybe stop drinking, maybe slow down drinking, maybe don't drink and drive, maybe. Like none of that was ever discussed. But my mother knew in that moment that her life, her dream was never going to be. And I watched the life drain out of her. And I can promise you, as God is my witness, it has never come back. The lights just went out. She was drained. And she knew in that moment that my father was having conversations with his mother that he was not having with her. And so we didn't move to Jersey or Roxborough or anywhere outside of the area. In fact, as an alcoholic stream would be, my father took his money and he was going to be an entrepreneur, and he bought a bar. And he moved us on top of this bar in South Philadelphia. It was probably a mile, less than a mile from where we lived. I was born into an apartment, but shortly thereafter into a home on Front and Mercy. And I knew everybody on the block, all the little kids. Uncle Timmy and Aunt Marie lived across the street. My godfather lived around the corner. The Kellys would live right next door, and all the little kids on the block. And I was just familiar with that, and I was scared to death because we were going to move. And that meant new friends, and it meant new school, and it meant new neighborhood. And I was so locked inside myself from being afraid, and I had such a negative, horrific narrative that played over and over and over in my head. My head raced probably, I like this, liken it to 110 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone, never saying anything nice, ever. You're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, they're not gonna like you, you're not gonna get that answer right, don't raise your hand, don't ask that question, don't look at the kid, don't go down there and ask them to play. I was paralyzed by fear on my block, paralyzed. And I would open the door and look out, and way down the block would be all the little kids, and they'd be playing. They'd be having a good time, hopscotch, hula hoop, jump rope, whatever they were playing, and they just looked like they were having a blast. And I was crippled with fear and anxiety and no esteem, and I was uncomfortable in my own skin and didn't want to go ask them if I could play. And I knew them all, and I knew their families. But I just felt so bad about myself. I had such a terrible self-image. I don't know where that comes from. You know what I mean? I don't really know. Is it spiritual malady? Sure. Is it from, lack of nurture? Is it from nature nurture? I resigned from the debating society. You know what I mean? And I know that it's not nature or nurture. It's both. It's both and. You know what I mean? And who knows? Who knows? God had other plans for me. I'm so glad he did. I'm so glad he did. So whatever pain I had to go through then, I probably would do it all over again if I knew this was going to be at the end of that road. I'd be willing to do it all over again. I would look out that door, and I would look down, and my mother would say, "Go play with the kids. Go play, Kim." And I'd be like, all right, and I would look, and it got like a Freddy Krueger movie, and the street just got longer and longer and longer, and I would try to go down, and I just couldn't quite get there, and I would get all the way down there, and I was so afraid that you wouldn't let me play. I would go, "Wow, I love your necklace. It's so beautiful. Can I play?" I'd say, "That's a great jacket. That's a great jacket. Can I sit there?" I was doing things that would compromise my moral fiber long before I picked up a drink. I think in the big book, like right around the second step, it describes me really well before you hit 3, and it talks about the actor who wants to run the whole show and is forever trying to arrange the lights and the scenery and the players, so that the show goes off really well. For me, of course. And so I was doing that early on, just manipulating, lying. I didn't even give you the benefit of the opportunity to determine for yourself whether or not you would like me. I just prejudged the situation and determined all by myself that you couldn't possibly like me based on how I felt about myself. I projected that onto you, and then I dishonored you. So if you didn't want to be my friend, why would you be my friend? Because I wasn't honest with you from the gate. But that's what I did, and I did it to survive as a little girl, feeling afraid and feeling scared and feeling insecure, and so I did it. And sometimes it worked, and people said, "Thanks," and they gave a big smile, and they let me play hopscotch with them, and sometimes it didn't work. They said, "No, I'm waiting for somebody, you can't sit there." And I would feel that rejection deep inside, and I would walk back to the house, and my mother would say, "Why aren't you playing with the kids? It's so beautiful out." And like the good child of an alcoholic household, I wanted to take care of her, you know what I mean? And so I'd say, "Oh, I don't like the game they're playing. I'm just going to stay here." Especially if they said to me, my mom said, "We can't play with you." Because we were the kids on the block that nobody could really play with because the cops were always at my house. And kids are cruel and they're honest, you know what I mean? They don't know. Out of the mouths of babes, it becomes a cliche because it's cliche. No, so that's how I was coming up. I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Then we moved. We moved on top of this bar, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I was so self-centered and so just, just consumed by self that all I could think about is, how am I going to make it in this new neighborhood? How am I going to make it in this new school? I mean, at least on my block, I knew who to let pick the game, who to let win the game, who to go first to the game, who to share my candy to, who to give a compliment to, who to stay away from. I figured all that out. Now I got to start all over. And I went to Catholic school, God bless you. I went to Catholic school, and I think Catholic schools back then, Our Lady of Mount Carmel had about 27 kids in a classroom. St. Casimir's, where we went when we moved, had probably a fewer amount of kids, maybe like 22, 25, but still 21 too many for me. You know what I mean? Like just way too much. And so I spent a lot of time in the house. Well, I want to say in the bar. We lived on top of the bar. It was 3 stories. And so what I did was, because I didn't have a lot of friends, was I would watch on a Friday night and a Saturday night while my mom and dad were running the bar. So my father took action. So they had lots of vices. Any vice that you could really think about getting involved in, they had at 1700 South 2nd Street. So my father, ran numbers and had poker machines and horse race betting and all-night card games in the back and go-go dancers and non-AA conference-approved materials being used and sold in the bathrooms and outside and just all this crazy stuff. That I probably shouldn't have been exposed to, but I was. And they had some good stuff. They had a shuffleboard league and a dart league and a softball team and a pool league. And so they had a lot of stuff going on, and it was always mobbed in there, because whether you were into the right stuff or the wrong stuff, that's where you convened. 1700 South 2nd. So every Friday night and Saturday night, it was 3 deep on every single side of the bar. It's like a gigantic, horseshoe, but not round, kind of squared off, rectangular, I don't know. Anyway, you'll find out that I flunked out of school early on. It's probably why I don't know my shapes. But anyway, I would watch them, and I would listen to the music. I would listen to it. And all the songs on the jukebox, and it would be just so loud, and people would be laughing and joking and smoking and drinking, and I just was like, wow. Like on a Friday and Saturday night. And they had a smile from ear to ear. They had rosy cheeks and big bright eyes. And when they laughed, it was like a genuine belly laughter. And I was so locked in my head and locked in my spirit and uncomfortable in my own skin. I can promise you I never smiled. And if I did, it was not genuine. It was not genuine. I just know that about me. You know what I mean? Like I look at pictures and I go, wow. Like, I never smiled. I didn't think I had anything to smile about. I was really suffering that spiritual malady. I was suffering. I was tortured by it. And so I would watch with my nightgown on every Friday and Saturday night. I'd have it pulled over my knees. I'd be leaning down just like this, looking into the crowd and thinking to myself, I want what they have. I want what they have so bad. I did not wait until I was 18, 19, or 21 to pick up a drink. My mother and father's situation they were gravely affected, let's say. They were gravely affected. And so my father would be drunk all the time, and I started to sneak down into the bar on Sundays. So my father and mother would close the bar on a Saturday night with their friends at 2 o'clock in the morning. They would clean up till 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they would leave with their friends, and they would go to the after-hours clubs, the IA, the Buckeye, the 48, the FOP, the Kashishka Club, anywhere that would let them drink until the sun came up, and then they would come home and they would be passed out. They would sleep like the dead on a Sunday. And on a Sunday, I would take full advantage of that opportunity, and I would sneak downstairs. And I would go to the jukebox up in the front, and I would turn the volume on, just loud enough where I could hear it, and jack the credits up on the back and plug in the numbers to all the songs I like. I would go to the quarter box and I would rob a roll of quarters, and I would open it up, and I would go to the cigarette machine, which was just to the left of the jukebox, and I would stick a quarter in, and it would go clank, 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 clank to the bottom of the machine. Then I would put another one in, and it would go clank, 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 and I would be like, oh my God, I hope nobody moves, I hope nobody wakes up. But when I would get to like $1.50, $1.75, I think, I would get a pack of Marlboro. I would grab the handle, I would pull it out, then I would walk it back in, and I would get a pack of Marlboro cigarettes. And then I would go behind the bar, and every liquor that tastes sweet, any one that tastes sweet, I would pour it in a glass. And I would sit with a rocks glass and a pack of cigarettes. I was not old enough to know how to inhale. And I would smoke a cigarette, and I would take that drink and suck it back. And I'm telling you, it was a magical elixir from the word go for me. Like it washed over my brain and went through my body, and I felt like I had electricity running through my veins, and all of a sudden I took a big sigh of relief. And I wasn't so tightly wound, and a smile crept across my face, and I fit in my own skin. I forged a relationship with alcohol at that very moment that you were going to have to pry it from my dead, cold hands. You weren't going to get it away from me, and you definitely were not going to get in the way of my drinking. And so I was 9 years old, roughly, when I had that first drink. And I did not drink every single Sunday, but I drank every Sunday I could. And then, as I started to escalate in my drinking, I began to have to sneak down into the basement, into their beer box, into their walk-in box, because I needed more. I needed alcohol. So I would take down a bag. I was a schemer. I would take down a duffel bag, and I would have my clothes in it, like pajamas or jogging clothes or whatever. And I would sneak right down the steps, and it was so crowded. People would be like, "Where are you going?" I'd be like, "Hi." I would sneak down, right down into the basement. It was scary as all get out down there, lots of pallets, but a cold walk-in box, and it had all the beer in there. And I would go in and I would get a quart of Budweiser. And I would wrap it in a t-shirt and put it in the bag, and I would get another quart of Budweiser, and I would wrap it in my pajama bottoms and put it in the bag and make sure it didn't like clink, 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 clink. And I would go up the steps, and I would sneak around, and my father would be annihilated by this point. He'd be sitting at the end of the bar like this, right by, and I would come around, and I would go behind him, and I would get right, when I tell you I'd get behind him, I'd get almost to the front of the door, and he'd go, "Yo, where you going?" Say, "I'm going to Audrey's, Dad." "You aight?" "I'm aight." And out the door I would go. I'd have 2 quarts of Budweiser in a bag. I'd have the money that I had left over from robbing his quarter box, the Sunday before or 2 Sundays before. And I would go over to Izzy's across the street. You didn't want to buy nothing but loose cigarettes from Izzy's, because even when he took them out, cockroaches jumped from everywhere. But he was the only store that would sell you the cigarettes, you know what I mean, when you were a kid. And I would be 10, 11, and 12 years old. And I'd be robbing my mother and father from their quarter box, from their savings in their top drawer, from, just from their beer box, anything I could get my hands on to get more alcohol. I began to cut school, right, because booze is now taking on a larger part of my life. So by the time I'm 13 years old, 12 and 13 years old, I'm cutting school, or I'm taking the church envelopes that they're giving me because I went to Catholic school. I'm ripping open the church envelopes, and I can't go in because my mom and dad are home, and they're waiting for me to come back from church with the church paper, not because they wanted me to be involved with religion, but because when you went to Catholic school, you better have that envelope in the church basket and the bulletin to prove that you went there. And so I would just go to the church, sneak in the back, take the paper right off the back of the thing. Out I would rip open the envelope, and I would go to Miss Mickey's, which is a speakeasy off Fifth Street in South Philadelphia. And Miss Mickey was an older woman, an older black woman, and she had about 75 kerosene heaters in her house, and she would shuffle over to the door, and I'd be like, she would answer it, she'd go, "What you need, darling?" I'd say, note scribbled in my own handwriting, "My mother needs 2 40s of Bud." She'd say, "Come on in here, darling." And I would go in, and she would go to the back, and she would get the 2 40s of Bud, and she would, "Let me put these in a brown paper bag so nobody sees you taking these to your mama." "That's a great idea, Miss Mickey." She would roll it up, and she would give it to me, and I would go down to Greenwood Street Park. And by this time, I had little girlfriends that I gravitated to in the neighborhood that were almost just like me. Not quite like me, but almost, and they were willing to drink. And so we would sit, 3 or 4 of us, but guess what? I robbed the money. I took the risk and went to Miss Mickey's. I carried the booze back. I get the first pull off the 40. Makes sense to me, right? So I crack it open, and I'm glug, 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 glug. And then I give it to you. And all of a sudden, I get what I now know as a resentment. I didn't know it then. I know it then. Yeah, I know it now. Because you are taking too much, and you are taking too long, and it has to go from you to you to you to you to you before it comes back to me, right? It's got to go around. I'm like, "Let's go! Bogo!" Bogart, smash. What's the matter with you? I don't know. Like, I had no idea what was happening to me, and the big book is pretty clear. It says we become dangerously and disgustingly antisocial. That was happening to me at 12 and 13 and 14 years old, and I had no idea that alcohol had me by the throat, and it was dragging me through my own young life. And I don't know how I kept those friends, but I did for a little while. But then, just like Bill's story, I become like a lone wolf, and I'm drifting from place to place to place, and I'm deluding myself into believing, that I just don't like you, and I don't trust you, and you got too much to say, and really nobody really wanted me around at a very young age, very young age. By the time I was 15 years old, I had dropped out of school because booze told me that that was for the rest of you suckers, and I was going to be an entrepreneur in the business of sales. Non-AA conference approved materials. So you would see me at school, but I wasn't actually in class or enrolled. I was in the fire escapes and the bathrooms and behind the building, and I was making money. So I told myself. Now, I can promise you I was pathetic, and I was delivering most of that money to somebody else. But I felt like a big shot, and I had drinking money all the time, because I didn't need that garbage and I didn't want that garbage. And I was a lunatic, believe it or not. I was like a young lunatic. I was not like a lady by any stretch of the imagination. And when I got to drinking, I got to fighting. Seriously. And I did some things that, could probably get you killed, should get you killed, should have got me killed, but, God knew better. And, just stuff like watching the drugstore across from the bar get robbed, and then going right around to that guy's house and knocking on the door and saying, I saw you and I saw so-and-so. So you're either going to break me off, or I guess you'll have to take your chances. Am I going to tell? And they broke me off. Lots of pills. I didn't know how popular the pills were back in the 80s, I made a ton of money on them. And I didn't take any of them, so it didn't matter. Like, I'm a hardcore alcoholic. You know what I mean? I will crawl to the bottom of a bottle looking for a solution that would never come. And, or I would get involved in like Grand Theft Auto and get pulled over, trafficking non-AA conference approved materials across state lines. I don't have a license. It's not my car. I call my dad. Dad, I need your help. I'm locked up. What? Where are you at? I don't know. Where am I at? Like in a complete and total blackout, driving with one eye, you know what I mean? Like, just ridiculousness. So I've been to 11th and Wharton, 24th and Wolf, 11th and Winter, 8th and Race, some podunk town near Maurice River County, just ridiculous. Just a shame. Like, I was no big shot. I was a pathetic young girl who just wanted desperately, in my heart and in my soul, I wanted to be a good girl. I wanted to be a decent girlfriend. I wanted to accomplish something. I wanted to be a good friend. I wanted to connect with people. I wanted to have decent, connected relationships with people. I didn't know how to do any of it. I possessed none of those mechanisms, none of those coping strategies. Anyway, I got to get sober at some point. So I'm going to tell you. My drinking, so I didn't graduate from high school. Probably about 18, 19 years old, I thought, I got to get a GED. I have to do something different. I really have to do something with my life. And I know I'm not going to have anything if I never go to school. So back then, it wasn't all these hoops you had to jump through like it is now. I was 88 when I got a GED. I was 18 years old, and I called up the school district and I said, I'd like to take my GED, and I sent a $10 money order in, and they sent me a list of places to go sign up and take it. And I went to a place, and I didn't even have to sit through GED classes back then. I took 2 tests on a Monday, 2 tests on a Wednesday, 1 test on a Friday. Out the door I went. I had a GED. I went and enrolled at Community College of Philadelphia. I was no dope, you know what I mean? And I was well, at least not academically. I wasn't a dope. But anyway. But I didn't realize you actually have to go to class if you want to graduate from college. And so I would sit in the like little courtyard out front of Community College of Philadelphia and just drink Tall Boys of Bud. And my friends would be like, aren't you going to go to class? I'll be in. I have the student loan debt to prove that. And of course, I drank my way right out of community college. By this time, I was bartending, though. I was making good money. So I was bartending. I was bartending at my neighborhood bar, blue-collar bars, lots of longshoremen, union carpenters, union electricians. That's where the money's at. All these high-end places people drink at, no thanks. I don't want a place. I'm not working anywhere where a pinky is raised because they don't tip. Right? So give me your watering hole with pool tables in the back and a whole lot of cursing, and I know I'm leaving on a Friday or Saturday night with $300-400 easy. And that's what I did. I worked at my neighborhood bar, and I worked at a bar called Mako's on 3rd and South. By this time, I want to tell you about the progression of alcoholism in my life. I was coming to probably at about 1 o'clock, shaking, tremors, getting showered and dressed, and showing up to Mako's to work a 4 o'clock shift at about 2 o'clock, drinking from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, then getting behind the bar at 4 o'clock to 2 o'clock and drinking while you drank. I was such a pathetic bartender that if you asked me for a drink, I'd say, listen, we don't make them drinks up here. We drink shots and beers, go down to the downstairs bar, get one down there, and don't ever interrupt me while I'm talking. Like, I would just be drinking for free, drinking with people who drank like me on the other side of the bar. They'd be shooting pool. I'd make sure they were taken care of because they're hustling money and they got more money than you got. You just want a Cosmopolitan. Who gives a shit? Like ridiculous. And I'm like, I got my eye on the prize, And I'm drinking. And of course, at the end of the shift, I'm closing the bar with everybody else at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're cleaning up. And I would never insult my boss, so I can't turn down his after shift drink. So I'm going to have my after shift drink, and we're going to clean up, and then we're going to go to the IA, the Buckeye, the 48, the FOP, the Kashishka Club. By that time, it was Baritz or the Revival, and we were going to drink all night until the sun came up, and then I was going to take a walk of shame home the next day in the same clothes from the night before, from the day before when I showed up to start drinking. And so that was my drinking career. And I worked at that bar, 5 nights a week. My best friend in the world, if you can believe I have one, and she is still the same one, from when I first moved into that new neighborhood. Her name is Amelia Collins. We are not anonymous among one another, and she is among us these days, thank the Lord, for big and small favors. And she came into the bar at Mako's. She had moved away. She was working down in Atlantic City, working in the casinos, doing the same thing I was doing, making money, slinging drinks, and she said to me, you look like you're dying. I was highly offended. They say if you tell somebody they're alcoholic, they're likely to be offended. I was so offended. Because I thought I looked cute. I had like short shorts on, little shirt, I was emaciated. It was crazy. And I looked like I'm dying. Let me help you. Help me. You don't help me, I help you. Whoa, calm down, Kim. I just why don't you come home with me for the weekend? Just get away for a couple days. I packed a bag for 3 days, and I stayed for 3 years. I know 15 minutes into that car ride, she was regretting that invitation. I know it. And I don't know how I kept her, because I did everything I could to burn that relationship to the ground. Anything a friend shouldn't do, I did, including being violent and taking advantage of a kindness. And she neglected to leave out a little portion of the information that would have benefited me in my decision-making as to whether or not I was going to go for the weekend. Bars down in Atlantic City were open 24 hours. And they were salespeople. They were in this business of sales, non-AA conference approved materials. So our house was a 24-hour party, and all the clubs and all the bars in Atlantic City are open 24 hours. And I went from the frying pan into the fire, and within 3 years, I was in a fetal position on the floor between my bed and the bathroom, begging God, begging God. My prayer sounded like this. What will you have me do? What do you want me to do? I can't think like this anymore. I can't feel like this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. Not one more second, not one more minute, not one more day. Help me or kill me. He did both. He did both that very night. I was drinking a fifth and a half of Cuervo every single day and lots of long neck bottles of Bud and any wine that I could get my hands on. And I was not a wine drinker, but my roommate was. And when I ran out of booze and I had the shakes on me, I was drinking her wine, you better believe it. And I no longer held food down, and I would throw up violently in the morning and take a drink and throw up and take a drink and throw up and take a drink. And when it would stay down, I would say, sure, I got to get something to eat. But I don't want to eat too much because if I drink on a full stomach, I might get sick. Right, glass in hand, we warped our mind into such a destructive obsession for alcohol that nothing but an act of providence is going to remove it. And I was beat. I was absolutely beat into submission and to a state of reasonableness. And in that moment of desperation, that was my cry to God. And I remember passing out, like that was it, passing out on the floor. And when I came to, it was as if all the alcohol was removed from my body and I was in the full-blown DTs. I felt like I had bugs crawling on me and I wanted to rip my skin off and run out of myself. And I didn't know what was going on because nobody in my family ever went to detox or rehab or counseling or, nobody, it didn't happen, you know what I mean? And so I didn't know what was going on with me, and I picked up the phone and I called my older sister, and booze took me out of her life a while ago, but this was the beginning of the divine providence in my life, and this is my spiritual experience. And some people have a vital spiritual experience, and some people have a spiritual experience of an educational variety. It unfolds over time, through the process of recovery outlined in the first 164 pages of the big book. And but my experience was very, very profound, and it burned that number right into my head, 215-462-4236. Next month, I'll have 24 years of continuous sobriety. I don't know how I remember that phone number, but you can't forget something like that. And I picked up that phone and I called my older sister and I said, Dawn, and she said, Kimmy, we love you. Will you please come home? And I said, what? And I had been so drunk for so long that I had no idea that it had been months since my family had heard from me. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know how I was. My mother had resigned herself, and she was doing her own thing still, but she had told me that she resigned herself to the idea that she would read the paper or watch the news and find out about a young female beaten, sexually violated, left for dead in an alley in Atlantic City. Like, how selfish. Like, I had zero clue what I was doing to my family. Like, not even, and never did that cross my mind. Never did that cross my mind. And I said, come home. She said, yeah, can you come home? And she said, let me come get you. She was afraid to let me get off the phone. Come get me. She said, yeah, where are you? And I promise you, as God is my witness, I didn't know my address. I was drunk for so long, I didn't know where I lived. Amy, my best friend, told me years into sobriety, years into her sobriety, which would have meant more years into my sobriety, that we lived at a place, 700 West Plymouth Place in Ocean City. Now, I got there by accident. It's a dry town. How the hell would I pick Ocean City to go live at? Like, I wouldn't. I don't even know how I got there. I don't know how we got there. I don't even know what happened. And but that's where we were living, and I didn't know how to tell my sister to come and get me. She said, what do you mean? She's not one of us. So, of course, she was like, what do you mean you don't know where you live? I'm like, I have no idea how to tell you to get me. And she said, what can I do? And I said, can you pick me up at the Philadelphia bus station? She said, where is it? I said, it's at 9th and Filbert in Center City. She said, when will you be there? I said, I don't know. And I learned about love and loyalty and forgiveness before I even crossed the threshold into Alcoholics Anonymous, because booze took her out of my life probably 2 or 3 years before that. I was in a very, very, very violent altercation. I don't know who with. I know I was filled with blood from head to toe. And when I walked into the house, she was screaming, a blood-curdling scream, ripping my clothes off, throwing me into the shower, trying to find out where I was cut to dial 911 or grab my father, when she realized it was not me. And And she was screaming, "Where were you? Somebody's hurt really bad." And I was in a full-on blackout, and I had no idea. And to this day, that willingness sits at the bottom of my 8-step list because I have no idea who that was, and I have no idea where I was. I have a willingness to make direct amends if I'm ever able to, but to date, it has not come to pass. And she stopped talking to me at that moment. She said, "It's too painful to love you." And so she came to get me. And she was at the bus station, and it was daylight out when I talked to her, and it was pitch black when I got there. And she never left. She left her house. As soon as she hung up the phone with me, she waited there all day and night. And when I walked in, she brought me to my mother's house. And my mother was kind enough to let me stay there overnight. And she said, "You got to talk to your father. He's around, and I want you to go and get some help. You could stay here, but you got to get some help." I knew I needed help. I really thought I needed an inpatient mental facility for at least 1 year. I mean, nobody thought like me. Nobody acted like me or drank like me, or I had so much shame. I felt like a filthy, rotten, stinking, wet dog hair suit was on me that I couldn't get off of. I couldn't get it off of me. And so I knew I needed help, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. And I'm thinking, how's my father going to help me? And what do you mean he's around? And I went to my grandmother's house and the next day, and I knocked on her door, and she was afraid to let me in, and rightly so. I used to torture that woman's life. I would come in there in a blackout, drunk, cook, nearly burn her house down, and when she would say something, I'd be like, "Shut up, Graham! Go to bed!" Like, just an animal. I was a vicious animal under the influence of alcohol. And she was scared to let me in, but she did. And I said, "I need to talk to my dad." And she said, "He's at a meeting." And I said, "He's at a meeting? Who's listening to him?" Like, I never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm telling you, as I stand here before you, I never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. I never heard of anybody who went to detox. I knew one guy who went to rehab when we were 16 years old. His name was Gary. He disappeared from us for 30 days. When he came back, he couldn't drink. We all felt really bad for him. We were sneaking him alcohol. You know what I mean? Sneaking him beers. I later found out that that was Gary's relapse, you know what I mean? And I didn't know. I knew nothing about you good folks, nothing about you. So I'm like, "What do you mean he's at a meeting?" She said, "I don't know, but he's got to get this paper signed, and he forgot it. Will you take it to him?" I said, "Well, where at?" She said, "It's the only place he ever goes when he's here," and every single line that was filled out said South Philadelphia Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, 1605 East Mensing Avenue. I'm thinking, Mensing Avenue, that's around the corner. What? Like, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know. So I walk around with the paper to the group, the meeting, and I knock on the door. Because I never heard of AA, so I didn't know you didn't need to knock to come in. So a guy opened up the door, and he looked me up and down, because I did not look like I was trying to get sober that day. I had really big, long black hair, a purple stripe, a Megadeth t-shirt cut down to no man's land, a biker jacket, ripped up jeans, Doc Marten boots laced up to the knee, and it was 3 sheets to the wind, I believe. I was probably still drunk from, the day before. And I looked at this guy, and he looked at me, and he said, "What do you want?" I said, "I'm looking for my father." He said, "Who's your father?" I said, "Christopher Package, Chris Package." He said, "I don't know him, but there's a lot of people. Would you like to come in?" And just like Jeffrey McGuire, he had me at hello. He became my first mistake in Alcoholics Anonymous. First, not last, but anyway. Anyway, you could take my fifth step and stick it on a billboard on I-95. I'm free, right? I'm free. It doesn't bother me today. Anything that didn't kill me, I learned from in this program if I had the right attitude and I was willing to surrender it to the Father of Light who presides over us all. So nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. And he said, "I don't know, would you like to come in?" And I said yes. And that was January 23rd, 1994. And I stepped over the threshold of that room in South Philadelphia Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have not had an excuse valid enough to pick up a drink or any mind or mood altering chemical since that time. And my father was way in the back. And he looked over, and he looked up and down, and he just shook his head, and he just waved me to come here. And I walked down, and this guy from our home group who's no longer with us, but died sober, Miracle Joe, stood up and he said, "Chris, is this your daughter?" And he said, "Yeah, Joe, that's my daughter." He said, "Sit here, honey." It was all longshoremen in that group, and all our guys. He got up, I sat down. I said, "Dad." He said, "Shh, don't talk during the meeting." I was incensed. Zing! My head went reeling. I hate him. I don't know why I came here. He never listened to me. He don't want to help me. Blah, 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 blah. Self-pity oozing from every single pore. You know what I mean? Like, oh, God. What a nightmare on legs. It was a nightmare. On 2 Doc Martens. It was a mess. And I tried again. Like, Dad. He went, "Kim," after the meeting. And inadvertently, he saved my life. Right? So I heard somebody say something, and I thought, I did that. And I heard somebody else say something, and I thought, I felt like that. Then I heard somebody way over in the corner say something, and I thought, wow, you were insane. I cannot believe that you're sharing that in front of all these people. And everybody's laughing. So I picked my head up to see who my new, hero was, and I looked. And I saw bright eyes and rosy cheeks and smiles, and they were laughing. And I can tell there was just light, just radiating off of them. And they had a cup of coffee in this hand and a cigarette in this hand, and I swear to you, I knew I was home. As God is my witness, I knew I was home. And I thought, where am I? This is bizarre. And after the meeting, Teresa DeCero was at the table in front of me. It was my dad, it was me, it was a couple other people, and she had her back to me, and she turned around, and she gave me a 24-hour coin, and she said, "Think before you drink, kid. The time to call your sponsor is before, not after." I'm like, what? Who's talking to you? Turn around, I'm talking to him. She just laughed and laughed and laughed. She was not scared off by me, not in the least. She said, "Don't you know where you're at?" I said, "No." She said, "You're in AA." I said, "What's AA?" She said, "Alcoholics Anonymous." And I promise you that 1, 2, and 3 just washed right over and through me, and I began to cry and cry and cry and cry, and my father began to cry and cry and cry. He was like, "What do you want?" I was like this. He said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes." And my father began to take me to meetings and introduce me to everybody. And Teresa became my first sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. And she said, "Kid, I'm going to teach you the ABCs of recovery. Ashtrays, brooms, and coffee. Shut up, suit up, show up, and be of service. Be of service. Listen to learn, and learn to listen, and then be of service." And I know I got to wind this down, but I want to say to you, at 5 years sober, in my ego, 5 years sober in my ego, not in this program, not in this work, just in this fellowship. I was sharing my experience, strength, and hope at the South Broad Street group, because I was going to help people, Was sober 5 years. I was so obnoxious. I knew what I had to do, I knew what you had to do, I knew what you weren't doing, be sitting in the back of the meeting. We called it a whack attack. We would wait for people to share it, and we'd be like, we pummel them like we were just retarded. I had no solution. Zero. I had God. And he got me sober, and he kept me sober in spite of myself. So I'm sharing my experience, strength, and hope, as at the South Broad Street group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in walks this woman with a newcomer. And if anybody knows this woman, she always has a newcomer with her, or a sponsee, or somebody she's helping in some way. And she walks into this meeting, and she's got this woman with her, I guess, who didn't want to go to a meeting, her first meeting in her own neighborhood. And that woman didn't stay. That new woman, she didn't stay. But I felt so bad because the woman was crying, during my share. And I thought, I have to help her. I can't let her leave. She's a wreck. And so after the meeting, I all but threatened her life for her to come to eat with us. That's how she tells it. I remember it a little differently. I remember saying, please let me help you. Can I take you to eat? It was not like that. I mean, I know as much to listen to her now. And she finally was coerced into eating with us at the Pekin Inn. We always laugh about that. It's really the Peking Inn, but because I have South Philly dialect, I'm like, we're going to the Pekin Inn. You want to come? She's like, the Pekin Inn? What? I'm like, we're going to get some Chinese food at the Pekin Inn. So we go. And she's sitting across from me, and I think I'm helping her, and I come to find out in the middle of that conversation that she was put there to help me. And she became my sponsor. So when I had 5 years, she had 10 years. And I also remember it a little differently. I remember her saying, will you sponsor me? Will you help me? Will you this? Will you that? She remembers me all but threatening her life into sponsoring me. Just short of it, I think. I don't know. And my recall's not that great, especially when I'm at fault. That's why I need God and this spiritual program of action, I always remember what you did in great detail, But that woman became my sponsor, and her name is Claire Keller, and she's been walking with me from the time I had 5 years. And she walks with me today, and she came with me tonight. And I could not think of another person that I would want to spend a day with, a night with, an experience with. She is my person. God gifted me with her and our relationship. And she walked me through the first 164 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and God blew the doors off of this thing for me. And when she had a new experience, I had a new experience. And when she had a new experience, I had a new experience. And we've just been journeying together, shoulder to shoulder, and I love her with all my heart. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. I'm not embarrassed to say I love God. I'm not afraid to say that I don't believe in any strangers, only friends I haven't met yet, and I already love you. And I'll never apologize for speaking her name, and she hates it. She's so humble. She absolutely will have something to say on the ride home about this, I promise. But I don't care, I'll take it. Because I know God gifted me with that relationship so that I could become whole. And I became a daughter through her guidance, and I became a sister, and I became an aunt, and I became a godmother 2.5 times over, because Amy had to pick her sister-in-law for the last child, but she really wanted me. We keep that a secret, right? So, but I became, I learned how to stick and stay in AA. I became teachable. I became transformed. My roots grasp a new soil. I went back to school in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I say this because I say, if you are new here, do not sell your God short. So I took that GED, and in sobriety, I got a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree, and a second master's degree, and I am 2 classes and 6 case presentations shy of becoming a nationally certified psychoanalyst, an NCCIA. I couldn't put a drink down. I couldn't behave in a group of people. And I just am amazed at what God Almighty has done in my life. I have love in my life. I have light in my life. I have joy so much that I want to rip my chest open and let it spill out all over. But I know you don't get it that way. You got to trudge the road, right? But I'm happy to walk with you. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Kimmy. Epic call. Thank you very much. We form a line. It's customary for us to form a line and thank our speakers. They come all the way up here at their own expense and own time. So again, one more time, thank you very much. Always epic to have you here. James B. from Boston next week. Our last meeting of the year, right? It's pretty cool. We are from now on. We're going to be hitting Perkins afterwards. So we'll clean up here. We'll be over there about 10 after 10. So if you want to come over and join us, if you can't afford it, don't worry about it. These guys are going to treat. Anyway, we got a nice way of closing if you care to join us.